This is not a review of the new Sigur Rós album, ÁTTA. ÁTTA is the 8th official studio album from the Icelandic post-rock group, and their first in a full decade. Anyone who keenly follows the channel might remember that back in September of last year, Jake and I released a video detailing every album in their discography up to that point. A labour of love that, for me, reflected how critically the band had shaped my appreciation for instrumental rock music from a young age, and for Jake reflected a band that were only a newfound obsession, but one which had still left a profound impact in a personal way. We didn't get terribly personal while discussing that band then, at least not relative to some of our other conversations about beloved artists. But still, re-evaluating my love for Sigur Rós some 17 years after I'd first heard them caused me to realise not just how enormously music had affected the lens through which I view my childhood, but also how it has shaped the direction of my life and my sense of identity. For as long as I can remember, music has been both a context for and an active factor within practically every meaningful stage of my life. I'm not going to give you a laundry list or speak with detail on a public forum about events that involve other people, but relationships, friendships, graduation, work, and so many personal achievements in my life have been accompanied with, if not outright shaped by, music. It's gotten to the point where, in committing the majority of my free time to this channel or things related to it, music has become all-consuming. I'm taking it in, I'm processing, I'm contextualizing, I'm analyzing, I'm surrounded by music at all ends of all days. It's both involuntary, as a matter of process for my brain to find stability and structure, and something painfully practical. I imagine I'm not the only person who lives in this way to some degree or another. It's even kind of funny, considering I'm not a competent musician, and anything I do that could be called artistic is at most a byproduct of music. But still, the music I take in, and the music I keep in my head, is the context for my life at 26. It's exhausting, but it's not disheartening, and it might surprise you that it hasn't left me in any way jaded or distanced from the art form. It's sustenance at this point. But it hasn't been until recently that I've started to really ask myself why. What does this do for me? How has it affected me? And why do I, in many ways, rely on it to function? How does music, taking it in and replaying it, make my life work? It has to be something more meaningful than the cliche of a constant in a sea of uncertainties, or recognizing yourself inside someone else's world. Many of us have a particular medium of art that we find most resonant and expressive. For those of us who consider that music, what is it that forges that particular bond, that offers it that role in our lives? I don't have a clear answer to that. I'm sure there are many. What I'd really like is to hear what it is for you that makes music that most special of things. I doubt any two people would have the same reason, or at the least a reason that comes from quite the same place. But for me, realizing how huge and defining music has come to be in my life happened in no small part thanks to that newest Sigur Rós album, which as I speak right now I've played 22 times in full. This is not a review of the new Sigur Rós album, ÁTTA. Though if pressed to articulate my thoughts on the record and where it fits in their catalogue, I could probably give you a rundown that would skew fairly close to the critical consensus, if maybe a little more glowing. I think it's a remarkable piece of music, deftly arranged to evoke their standard timbres of glacial sorrow and sun-bleached euphoria in an ebbing, continuous dynamic. It doesn't sound mawkish or cloying, and it avoids letting the absence of a rhythm section feel like a hampering limitation by making it a defining characteristic. It's hard to tell whether the music is composed to evoke a sense of bittersweet longing, weary repose, or a hopeful chance at a fresh start. And that ambiguity, for me, intensifies all three readings of the music. Like a stereogram, if I adjust my perspective, a new interpretation of its shapes will slide into focus. In some respects, it reminds me of the final album from Ryuichi Sakamoto, 12, released earlier this year before his passing. That record was stark in its minimalism, and almost wholly defined by an absence of clarity that took the form of barely musical etchings. It was challenging and beautiful in equal measure, as much of Sakamoto's later work tends to be. ÁTTA offers far more comfort than 12, and occasional concessions that will allow fans to connect with the work more immediately, if perhaps less intimately. All of that is a fairly flowery overview, probably a little overwrought, because if working on this YouTube channel has taught me anything, it's that I'm best at expressing myself by working things out verbally with my friends, a process that is always to a large degree improvisational. I like to write too. I do it a lot, and most of it I'll never share, but I know I tend to get a little more affected in that format, more distance from the natural shapes of conversation that refine me better than my own editing. As I've been listening over and over to ÁTTA, letting its fuzzy atmospherics and sweeping strings soften the edges of my shittier thoughts, I've been appreciating more and more how lucky I am to have the format of this channel, and more pertinently, the friends I share it with. Is it that music has become such an all-encompassing part of my life because it's the reason I hang out with my friends every week? Am I letting music occupy my brain at all hours and in all places because I'm afraid of losing something it has given me? After all, if it weren't for music, I wouldn't have these friends, and I wouldn't have this creative purpose every week, and I wouldn't have discovered key things about myself and my identity that I spent nearly 25 years afraid of and hiding from. This is not a review of the new Sigur Rós album ÁTTA, and it's not a coming out video either, even though I'm not yet publicly transgender, and in mostly online spaces I've gone by an adopted name for over 18 months now, to the point where hearing my birth name used to address me in real life is jarring and foreign. This isn't intended to be some searing self-analysis, nor is it some attempt to finally understand myself in a conclusive way. This is not even really a video at all. In its deliberate, pre-written planning, it's one of the most disciplined things I've uploaded here. And in its pretentious, self-indulgent insularity, it's one of the least disciplined things I've uploaded here. But if there is a point to what I'm doing with this, why I'm taking up your time, it's that I don't understand so many of the things that make up the architecture of my life and of this channel that I, with my friends, put so much of myself into. I don't understand so much of the music and art that I love. In all honesty, I rarely have a full sense of why so much of it affects me. I have educated guesses. I have logic and context that I use to attempt an understanding in every single video we do here. But perhaps the reason music is so all-consuming for me is that it's something I cannot solve, but that in trying to shape around my own life and my own feelings and my own experiences, I try to assimilate it into a positive step forward for myself. Every week when I'm here describing the music I've been listening to and going back and forth with my friends on how things compare through our hopelessly biased frameworks, I'm shaping my reality into something positive, something that can make living better. This is not really a video, at least not like the other things we create here are videos, but it takes the shape of one because I am using that format to try to know myself better, not just an album. Because of that, I get the appeal will be limited, so I'm sorry if anyone feels I've wasted their time. But if you're like me, or if any of this resonates with you, maybe you'll join me in trying to know ourselves better, by knowing better the things, like records or films or games or whatever, that we choose to spend our lives inside. Maybe that'll seem like a useful endeavor, or maybe it'll seem meaningless. All I know is that the limited understanding of myself that I do have comes more from what I do here, the music I do it for, and the people I do it with, than anything else. This isn't a coming out video, but it takes the shape of one because coming out, I've realized, is a part of the process of understanding why I love music. Because why I love music is why I am myself. This is not a review of the new Sigur Rós album ÁTTA either, but it takes the shape of one because my life for the last couple of weeks has been embedded in ÁTTA and surrounded by it. And the formlessness of my own identity outside of the gender binary is like the haziness of that album. Our identities, like records, are open to our own interpretation. And it's not a weakness of self, nor a weakness of art, to be unable to hold that interpretation in place. The album is called ÁTTA, and I am called Ryley, and I'm fine with the rest being unclear. I'm fine letting my perspective shift and my focus readjust to see these things in a new light, in a new moment. This is not a review of the new Sigur Rós album ÁTTA, but it is the story of how I came to understand ÁTTA by accepting my understanding as a perpetual and uncertain process. It's how making videos with my friends for this channel is a way to find the same joy out of creating that comes from taking in something created and personal that was shared with the world first so that we could share in return. It's the story of how knowing the world and my work and my family and my friends and my own identity has always been the story of listening to records.